Hey everyone, Cannon here again. For this week's lesson, we're going to take a look at seventh chords and how to use them to build and resolve tension. In particular, we're going to take a look at a quick study I've came up with involving 7th Arpeggios that moves through all 6 basic types of 7th chords so that you can see how they interact, how they can be used to build off of one another to, as I said, build and resolve tension. So we'll take a look at that, and then I'll break it down, explain how I approached it and how the concepts work and how you can use it in your own playing. Hope you dig it. Okay, so now on to break it down. First things first, I should mention I am a half step down on this guitar. It's not that way in the notation. I wrote it for standard tuning and just felt like playing this guitar today, so just heads up on that. If it sounds a half step off, that's why. But it is written out for standard tuning. Okay, now on to the first arpeggio. Another thing that I'll mention first off is that all of these arpeggios are played in the second inversion. What that means is that the starting note is the 5th of said arpeggio. So it goes 5th, 7th, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, root, so on and so forth. So that's just the particular voicing that I chose for this study. So we start off with a G major 7, played like this. 5th, major 7, root, major 3rd, and 5th. Moving on up, we get to the next chord, the G augmented. What this means is that the 5th is becoming a sharp 5, a raised 5th. It's the only note that's changing. We have the same major 7th, root, and major 3rd from before. So it's played like this. Augmented 5th, major 7th, root, major 3rd, and augmented 5th. Now, what does that augmented 5th do for us, you may ask? Well, it creates tension. It gives you something that's not normally found in the key and chord that we're working with, and since it's moving chromatically from the regular natural 5th to the raised 5th, it's still very, very relatable to the non-altered chord. Because we still have those other 3 tones to guide us, it feels like somewhere we've been before, but just a little bit more uneasy, a little bit more mysterious than what that G major 7 was. It creates chromatic movement that you can use to make your transitions between chords all the more smoother. So, continuing with that movement upward, we go from the G augmented to the A7. Again, all these chords are in the second inversion, so that means we have the 5th in the root. So it goes 5th, dominant 7th, which is a minor 7th, but because we have a major 3rd, it's considered a dominant 7th. So 5th, dominant 7th, root, major 3rd, 5th. So we've gone back to somewhere nice and pretty again from that tense G augmented, and because we went with the second inversion, that augmented 5th creates chromatic movement between the natural 5th of the G and the natural 5th of the A. Natural 5th of the G, raised 5th of the G, and natural 5th of the A. That's what movement we have hidden in all these notes flowing through arpeggios. By focusing on little melody lines or root notes, even though that's not quite the right word to use, but roots in the, or notes in the bass, or just try to find little melodies and movements hidden within the chords that you're working with. If you can get really tight chromatic movement just somewhere in the chord changes, you can get away with really, really crazy out there chord changes because they have that smooth transition. So just experiment a little bit. It's fun. From the A dominant 7, we're moving to B minor 7. So sacrificing our chromatic movement to just make a nice shift to another pretty diatonic 7th chord, one found within the key we're in, which is D major, by the way, in case you're wondering. So we have the 5th, the minor 7th, which is called a minor 7th this time, the root, the minor 3rd, and the 5th. I don't know what that was at the end, but it was something. So the point with this is we're just moving just straight up, like I said, diatonically through the chords that fall naturally into the key. So it's something a little bit more familiar, that movement. If you get too heavy with the tension, I mean, there's a time and a place for it for sure, but for what I was going for here, I didn't want to get too heavy with the tension. I wanted it to just kind of be sprinkled in a couple places rather than getting really, really outside for the whole piece. So by jumping back and forth between those tension building chords and the more pretty diatonic chords, you can create the different kinds of feelings you want in the pieces that you're creating. Next, from the minor 7, we move on to a fun one. We're dropping the 5th of the B minor 7 down to a flat 5, so we end up with what's referred to as a half diminished chord, a minor 7 flat 5 as well. So we have, I don't know why I keep switching to my neck pickup, doesn't really matter. So we have the 5th, sorry, the flat 5th, natural 5th, and flat 5th. So flat 5th, minor 7th, root, minor 3rd, and flat 5. There we go. Almost had a too happy sounding 5 there for a second. So what that does is, again, going back to the chromatic movement from before, it's just dropping one note from the chord from the previous measure, one semitone down. So we go from the already pretty dark sounding minor 7, but still it's got some lift to it just from the presence of that 7 in there. And by dropping to the flat 5, we get really dark. And from that point, the descent into darkness continues with a fully diminished chord. Now what that means is we have a root, a flat 3rd, a flat 5, and a doubly flatted 7. So instead of a minor 7, we end up with what's referred to as the diminished 7. And it's technically the major 6 if it was in another place, another time. But in this case, it's considered double flatted or a diminished 7. So A sharp diminished, we have flat 5, diminished 7, root, flat 3rd, and flat 5. And then same exact thing, 3 frets up for the C sharp diminished. Root, I'm sorry, not root. Flat 5, diminished 7th, root, flat 3rd, and flat 5. You've probably heard countless times from guitar players like Yngwie and other in that neoclassical realm. You'll hear them use diminished, or guitar players like him, I should say, you'll hear guitar players like that use diminished arpeggios a lot. I mean a lot, as ways to transition between the prettier chords. And from there, we resolve to a nice, happy D major 7, as home bass is going to get in this chord, this key of D major. So we have fifth, a major seventh, root, major third, and fifth. And then that ending lick is those same tones, major seventh, root, third, major third, sorry, and then root, major seventh, root. Okay then, that should wrap things up for this week's look at 7th chords and 7th harmony, 7th arpeggios, every variety of sevens we can throw at you. So I hope I was able to show you some ways that they can be applied, how they work in context, and from there you can figure out ways you can apply it to your own playing. 7th chords are a bunch of fun, and they're a really easy, once you get your head wrapped around it at least, a really easy way to sound very fancy, because you can play all these interesting extensions over more basic power chords or even single note riffs, and it'll sound really interesting because you're adding tensions and resolutions to the chords that you're playing over rather than just rote following the chords that you're playing over. You can imply some really fun things with these kinds of concepts, but that's for another time. We'll get into implying chord progressions and that sort of thing. So, as always, I hope you had fun with it. Thanks again.